Good morning, ladies and germs, and welcome to my log. I have long considered the term social sciences to be a clever trick of misinformation, where use of the word science is the principal deception. The name was coined following a tendency in higher education to claim authority by referring to their discipline as a science, based on natural science as a category. Obviously, calling one's discipline a science gives that discipline credence, but anyone can see the social sciences have little, if any, resemblance as subjects of study to the natural sciences. What the social sciences have in common with the natural sciences, vaguely speaking, is a methodology by which catalogs of objects, phenomena, and historical events are named and classified. And yet, where one is classifying psychological tendencies or human behaviors or political regimes or societal values, and where those classifications, so uniformly diverse, are said to fall within 3 or 4 principal categories that are further broken down into 20 or 30 subcategories, each of which is broken down into still more subcategories, etc., there may appear to be a rationale by which all of these phenomena are connected and constitute a legitimate area of study, even to the point where one may claim to be capable of predicting outcomes according to a chosen set of criteria as applied to these categories. But all of this is an intellectual deception. None of these areas of study is capable of predicting anything. They are in their infant stages, and yet they are treated as fully realized areas of expertise after the degrees have been awarded. Even economics, which is as much a science as psychology or sociology, is incapable of predicting outcomes. Successful economists are little more than successful gamblers, with the same set of talents, including the ability to bluff and dissimulate, such that their opponents are fooled. Those who participate in these disciplines are themselves hoodwinked by the game they are trained to play and by which they falsely claim the title of expert. But the plethora of these practices has made a farce of higher learning, and the fact that these areas of study now dominate what we call the humanities is an indication of how this sea change in our intellectual perspective is doing far greater damage to society than all the wrongs these social scientists claim to be remedying, such as domestic violence, poverty, child abuse, and the 4 foundational ideologies, each with its own unique narrative, upon which the social sciences depend most in legitimating their existence: racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, and homophobia. The truth is, nothing can be predicted using the practices and knowledge base of these disciplines. The subject of psychology, human emotions, or human behaviors in no way resembles a topic to be found within the natural sciences, despite the thick catalog of, quote, mental illnesses, unquote, to which they refer. In truth, there is no such thing as a mental disease. There are diseases of the brain which are chemical in kind, but to say aberrant behavior is a disease, or an inability to be happy within a particular social or personal setting is a disease, is ridiculous. Most of these psychology experts engage in nothing more than a talking cure, and a virtual army of such experts can be found in any major city in the U.S. With little, if any, expertise at their disposal, and certainly nothing of medical science in their cabinets, they are given the authority to diagnose whether an individual is sick or well, whether he is a threat to society or a benefit, and what his future holds, both personally and professionally. These charlatans can place individuals in hospitals based upon the same false claims of expertise, while those with degrees in social services, as the area of study is called, though the name is extremely vague, are given the authority to separate parents from their children, to place fathers in prison or young children in foster homes where abuses are even more widespread. Meanwhile, those with degrees in public health ineffectively participate in health crises around the world, while at once admonishing politicians for failing to allocate the proper funding or initiate the proper policies. Even once the funding and policies are in place, the public health expert, so-called, is little more than a gambler toying with the lives of third world peoples, tricked into thinking a master's in one of these false disciplines is a proof of professional efficacy and legitimacy. I don't believe there is even one area of study within the category of social sciences that can legitimately claim a quality of expertise, though all, in fact, do just that. The main activity one finds among these so-called scholars is the propagation of politically correct, moralistic demands on individuals and governments, a limited set of positions concerning ethical action, which is invariably self-contradictory, whether of individuals, of states, or of specific ethnic identities. The criteria they use to assess these entities are inconsistent, superstitious, and non-scientific, even to a point of dogmatic certitudes without any rationale other than the fact that they were taught to believe it true. They follow this set of dogmatic criteria that has been handed down to them from one generation to the next since the Second World War, though their evaluative mechanisms are not the product of scientific findings or a scientific method. Instead, their methods and truisms are the product of an idealized view of what will best serve a very limited few of a perfect society. Based on empty terms like patriarchy, multiculturalism, tolerance, and a seemingly unlimited list of epithets by which accusations of racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, and homophobia are instigated, such that lives are ruined, reputations lost, careers destroyed, and higher education is reduced to little more than indoctrination. And all of this in the name of social harmony and ethical conformity. These disciplines add up to little more than a species of brainwashing, which seems to be the principal purpose of these areas of study we call the social sciences. Beneath the surface of these methods, there is a deep and abiding disgust for the common citizen, who is thought to be an ignorant, mean-spirited, ever-volatile threat to the elites they are called into service by these faux disciplines to protect. I ran across a video that triggered me into thinking about all of this, and I'd like to watch it with you now and consider the methods by which these social scientist experts gain authority. I'll say at the start, their message is false, their epithets are empty, and their claims of ethics and morality are instances of blind, idiotic, routinely self-righteous dogmatism posing as an enlightened view. It's nothing more or less than a blame game, and it is the dominant method of instruction to be found in higher education of the West at this time. So the video is called "The Coronavirus is Our Future," and the speaker, it's a TED Talk. Her name is Alana Shaikh. I don't know, there's no information on her biography or anything about her beyond the fact that she is a public health expert and she has been working in various parts of the world. When I looked up her resume, it actually said she had only worked 1 month in Sierra Leone, I guess dealing with Ebola, and 1 month in 2 years in Egypt, which I don't believe was actually related to the topic she claims. I'm glad you can hear me. Good to see you, Nicholas. Thanks for coming. So let's just listen to her. I don't want to go on too long here. I don't want to make a 2-hour video. But I just want to comment on the things she has to say.
Here by talking a little bit about my.
Okay, let's turn it up because I don't know how well you can hear her. And let's go back a bit. Okay. I have to say, these TED Talks, which I've heard people praise quite a lot, and teachers especially like them because it's something they can show their students and it's like a lecture. But I think in most cases, these are people from the social sciences and they're just not to be trusted. It's propaganda. I think one of the most popular TED Talks out there is one in which a woman claims to be able to determine whether or not people are lying based on their behavior. And I'm sorry, but anyone who claims to possess that kind of skill is themselves a liar. There are no such skills available. Honest people will behave in the same ways as liars. It's ridiculous to think that you can work out who is lying and who isn't. That's some throwback from the World War II era spy espionage stuff. But it's a really good example of how these people, and invariably they claim expertise. They are experts. That's a really popular phrase among these social scientists. You won't find it as often among people dealing in the natural sciences, I don't think. Maybe you do.
Lead here by talking a little bit about my credentials.
So of course, she begins with her credentials. I can't imagine a person who actually possesses credentials wanting to start by talking about his credentials, but because you will see later she's such a strong feminist, and in another interview I saw her claiming that people in public health, which is her area, she has a bachelor's degree, she's going to tell us, but in the interview she was saying men were not listening to her in meetings because there's so much sexism in the field of public health. It's funny that maybe she just wasn't saying anything that was actually of interest. What if she was a man and the men in that room weren't listening to her? That man would not have access to the excuse that they're just sexist. He'd have to question maybe what he has to say is unimportant. Given this lecture and the content of it, I'm not surprised people are ignoring her. So let's say she begins the meeting by saying just this: let me tell you a little about my credentials and what makes me an expert. And let me gauge my expertise from 0 to 10.
This up with you. Because quite honestly, you really, really should not listen to any old person with an opinion about COVID-19. So I've been working in global health.
Now we've got a pandemic going on, epidemic, whatever you want to call it, and this woman purports to tell us now about the coronavirus, and she's got something like 4.5 million views on this thing and 200,000 likes.
For about 20 years. And my specific technical specialty is in health systems and what happens when health systems experience severe shocks. I've also worked in global health journalism. I've written about global health and biosecurity for newspapers and web outlets, and I published a book a few years back about the major global health threats facing us as a.
So what is global health journalism? I mean, how many different kinds of journalism are there? Are there as many types of journalism as there are master's degrees coming out of the university? Global health journalism. What she is a blogger. She has a blog and she writes articles about these different subjects, and she's an entertaining writer, and she's written a book, and right now she's selling books. I mean, this is a person who is in the business of selling herself as an expert and thereby selling her writings. That's her whole, in my opinion, that's her whole game. 20 years of experience, she says. 20 years, just 20 years since she received a degree. Again, on the website I found where she is applying for jobs, she has like 2 months in 2 different places of experience that she lists, and outside of the United States. And then 2 years in Egypt, which in the interview, again, she talked about how she ended up in Egypt, and it didn't seem to be that impressive as a professional reference.
I have supported and led epidemiology efforts that range from evaluating Ebola treatment centers to looking at transmission of tuberculosis in health facilities and doing
Transmission of tuberculosis in health facilities, but very little details about where this is going on. And she's dealing with Ebola in, I guess, Sierra Leone back in those days. Well, once she shows up as an American with this master's degree in global health from Boston University, a lot of these foreign countries are going to allow her in and let her consult. More than likely, she was something more like a consultant. She wasn't hired outright. In my suspicion, and the way she talks now sounds very much like somebody who is amping up their experience and, what do you call it, padding. She's padding her resume by talking about things in this way, using epidemia. She's not an epidemiologist. She has no expertise at all in epidemiology, but she throws out that word to say, in other words, she was maybe making schedules for doctors or something. I mean, what more could she be doing, actually, but acting as an administrator, which she could as well be doing as a manager of a McDonald's.
avian influenza preparedness. I have a master's degree in international health. I'm not.
It's public health, but okay, international health. It's public international health, I guess. I guess all of these degrees have various subcategories. Specialized intellectuals, right? That's the tendency, as Foucault told us.
I'm not a nurse. My specialty isn't patient care or taking care of individual people. My specialty is looking at populations and health systems. What happens when diseases move on the large level?
Populations and what is she just talking about? How would she even have any information if she's not if she's not a physician of some kind? She uses statistical analysis in some way?
If we're ranking sources of global health expertise on a scale of 1 to 10.
Can you believe that this person is doing this? She's ranking her expertise now on a scale of 1 to 10.
1 is some random person ranting on Facebook.
A random person ranting on, okay. And that's not you.
And 10 is the World Health Organization. I'd say you can probably put me at like a 7 or an 8.
She's like an 8 in comparison to doctors who are actually working in the field and going to these different places. She's like an 8. I suppose the World Health Organization looks to her to get information on how they should approach all of this. Maybe they're consulting. She's consulting with them also.
So keep that in mind as I talk to you. I'll start with the basics here, because I think that's gotten lost in some of the media noise around COVID-19.
And here she just gives us all these basic ideas about COVID-19, how you can catch it, where it came from, and so on. Nothing new. And anyone who's been keeping track of this, as I have on YouTube for the past 6 weeks, nothing that she says is in any way new, but the way she describes it sounds like a parent talking to a 4-year-old. Just the first part. Let's just listen to the very first part.
So, COVID-19 is a coronavirus, and coronaviruses are a specific subset of virus, and they have some unique characteristic as viruses. They use RNA instead of DNA as their...
My understanding is that coronaviruses, some use RNA and some use DNA, and the subset of viruses, I mean, the way she's talking is just so without expertise, absent expertise, she seems to be. She's certainly not a medical person.
Material. And they're covered in spikes on the surface of the virus, and they use those spikes to invade cells.
They use those spikes to invade cells. Don't you love the language? It's like a Game of Thrones. Is that the name of that show? It's a Game of Thrones episode.
Those spikes are the corona in coronavirus. COVID-19 is known as a novel coronavirus because until December, we'd only heard of 6 corona.
It's known as a novel coronavirus. Now she's going to explain to us what this means. All it means is it's new. We didn't know about it before.
Viruses. COVID-19 is the 7th. It's new to us. It just had its gene sequencing. It just got its name. That's why it's novel. If you remember SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome, or MERS, Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, those were coronaviruses. And they're both called respiratory syndromes because that's what coronaviruses do. They go for your lungs. They don't make you puke. They don't make you bleed from the eyeball.
Oh, they don't make you puke and they don't make you bleed from the eyeballs. Well, by golly, thank you so much for clearing that up. That really, I was thinking it made you bleed from the eyeballs.
They don't make you hemorrhage.
They don't make you hemorrhage either, okay.
For your lungs.
Well, maybe your lungs would hemorrhage. No? Okay.
COVID-19 is no different. It causes a range of respiratory symptoms that go from stuff like a dry cough and a fever all the way out to fatal viral pneumonia.
Okay, so she's giving us a bunch of symptoms. Let's jump ahead.
We're ever going to see. There's going to be more outbreaks, and there's going to be more epidemics.
Okay, so here's now she's really laying it on the line. This is her expertise now is telling us there's going to be more epidemics. I thought this would be the last one. Wow, you're really informing the public here.
That's not a maybe. That's a given. And it's a result of the way that we as human beings are interacting with our planet.
Okay, later she says we are occupying the planet. All of her language points to this one ideology in which human beings are doing bad things, and we need people like her, these social scientists, to step in and admonish us, to make us behave. We're misbehaving like children in a nursery. She's going to step into the nursery, and in forums like TEDx, many of the intellectuals, so-called intellectuals in TED Talks, play that role. They admonish us and they say you must change your behavior in these different ways. So now she's going to claim that the coronavirus is the product of bad things we're doing to the planet. Viruses like this. And it's absurd.
Human choices are driving us into a position where we're going to see more outbreaks. Part of that is about climate change and the way a warming climate makes the world more hospitable to viruses.
Of course. Of course, it's climate change, and the warmer climate, it makes it more hospitable. What? I thought they didn't like the warmth. Okay, all right. The warmer climate, yeah.
Bacteria. But it's also about the way we're pushing into the last wild spaces.
We're pushing into the last wild spaces. We are going where no man has gone before, which is a bad thing.
When we burn and plow the Amazon rainforest so that we can have cheap land for ranching.
Okay, so we're burning in the Amazon rainforest, yeah.
When the last of the African bush gets converted to farms.
Okay, so the African bush is getting destroyed and converted into farms.
When wild animals in China are hunted to extinction.
Wild animals in China are being hunted to extinction. Okay, yeah.
Human beings come into contact with wildlife populations that they've never come into contact with before.
So that's what it is. So the fact that we more or less know that it was bats that brought this COVID-19 to us, still, when we cut down that Amazon rainforest, there's no record of any diseases coming out of that, nor out of the African bush, as far as I know. MERS and the SARS one and so on, the chicken, whatever that one is. All of these things are coming from animals that we commonly know about. Nothing new from out of the wilds of the Amazon rainforest or the African bush, or Chinese hunters are making wild animals extinct. Okay.
And those populations have new kinds of diseases.
Do you see how this fits the narrative? The bad things that human beings are doing to this planet. It's the global warming narrative, and she's turned the virus in that direction. It's now this virus has become evidence of all of the other arguments that she's pushing for in most other days of her life. Probably 20 years ago, something to do with global warming set her on this path. Some idea of political correctness that she was taught in the university, and now she tailors all the things that are happening in the world toward the same idea so that she can have relevance. Because if she's an expert in something that's proven false, then she has no relevance. She has to find something that she can blame people for, and then she can make claims about the need for someone like her to give TED Talks and blog and write books that we should all go and buy and read in order to be good people.
Bacteria, viruses, stuff we're not ready for. Bats in particular.
Funny how she then talks about bats. Bats in particular are the source. She's just told us that these wild animals that we've never come in contact with are the problem. Then out of the blue, she just mentions bats. Okay, bats.
A knack for hosting illnesses that can infect people, but they're not the only animals that do it.
The wild animals that we've never encountered before also do it.
So as long as we keep making our remote places less remote, the outbreaks are going to keep coming.
What does that mean? What does that even mean? There's some weird connection in her brain to global warming and the fact that we're cutting down rainforests and making remote places less remote, that she is now applying to the virus. This is the logic, this is the science of the social scientist. This is how social scientists do things.
We can't stop the outbreaks with quarantine or travel restrictions.
This actually disturbs me deeply, because China just kicked this thing's ass, and it's not over yet. But what they have done is amazing. They have stopped the further infections at something like 80,000, and in the city where I am, 13 million people, 157 cases has been the number for the past 3 or 4 weeks. And that's what they managed to do with quarantine, quarantining people. She's going to give a whole long argument against the idea of quarantining.
It's everybody's first impulse. Let's stop the people from moving. Let's stop this outbreak from happening. But the fact is, it's really hard to get a good quarantine in place. It's really hard to set up travel restrictions. Even the countries that have made serious investments in public health, like the US and South Korea, can't get that kind of restriction in place fast enough to actually stop an outbreak.
It's just completely false, completely untrue. But this fits her narrative when it comes to Trump's wall and immigration ideas. For her, quarantine is like cutting off people from, it's the prejudice thing. So it's going to be people in power forcing people without power, which is more or less how I felt about the quarantine in China. I had a similar kind of response, like, this is too authoritarian. Where's my freedom? Why is China treating me in this way? This is how China treats its people. But in fact, I'm a convert. I can see that it's not the case when it comes to this. When it comes to this, you don't buy into the ideas of liberty. You set liberty aside. This is a time when crying out fire in the theater is a relevant complaint. Demanding freedom in a time of quarantine is similar to the freedom of crying fire in the theater. She's going to go through a long thing here telling us why quarantine is not going to work, and then she's going to tell us that instead we need to we need to help impoverished countries to have better systems of dealing with diseases like this and so on. It's like she's not even aware that there is a pandemic, and she's getting all this attention and no dislikes. And at one point toward the end, she even says you shouldn't wear a mask. Masks are have no purpose at all. And yet she's not a doctor. She's not someone who should be telling us this. At the end also, she tells people, wash your hands, kind of like a mother figure, which is, again, in my opinion, very much what the social sciences do. They nurture. The social sciences claim to nurture society, and by providing this kind of, even admonishing, right? Telling the children, stop playing rough, stop hurting each other. That's a kind of nurturing thing. And she fits the I don't want to watch any more of her, actually. I don't think she has anything else to say that's...
Instantly. There's logistical reasons for that, and there's medical reasons. If you look at COVID-19, right now, it seems like it could have a period where you're infected and show no symptoms that's as long as 24 days.
That's a medical reason not to have a quarantine? Watch it on your own. Whatever. It's just a really good example, I think. How long have I been doing this? Well, anyway, thank you for dropping in. I tried to make a video today using this video and my commentary on it that wasn't live stream, and I just don't have the expertise. I can't make things work, and my computer's messing up these days. It's not recording correctly, and I can't use my movie editing program properly. So thanks for visiting or watching or whatever, and please subscribe and like, and don't enter into a course of study in the social sciences if you know what's good for you. That's the other problem here, is that the social sciences have taken the place of the humanities, and I keep talking about the humanities in these videos, and the only reason I started to pay attention to what the social sciences were doing is because I cared about the humanities. And it's so clearly a battle being waged once again. It's a battle being waged between two sides, and both are trying to gain dominant ground. Okay, guys, take care. Be good. Subscribe.